In 1999, students Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold carried out a massacre that would shock the world and forever change how people viewed school safety and violence in America. On the morning of April 20th, 1999, life at Columbine High School seemed completely ordinary. Students attended classes, joked with friends, worried about grades, and made plans for the future. The suburban area surrounding the school was considered quiet, safe, and peaceful, the kind of place where nobody imagined a tragedy like this could happen. But by late morning, that sense of normalcy was shattered forever. Among the students arriving at school that day were 16-year-old Craig Scott and his sister Rachel Scott. The two had argued in the car on the way to school over being late, something that seemed meaningless at the time. Craig would later remember slamming the car door and walking away, never realizing it would be the last time he would ever see his sister live. Nearby, 15-year-old Sean Graves and his friends stepped outside during lunch, expecting another routine school day. Instead, they noticed two young men dressed in black trench coats carrying large duffel bags near the top of a hill outside the cafeteria. At first, the boys assumed the weapons they saw were fake or part of some prank. Seconds later, gunfire erupted. Bullets tore across the school grounds as students began running in panic. Sean Graves was struck after a bullet entered his backpack, ricocheted, and hit him in the back before exiting through his hip. Instantly paralyzed from the waist down, he collapsed near the cafeteria entrance while chaos exploded around him. Students inside the cafeteria froze in terror as fire alarms rang through the building and hundreds began fleeing in every direction. Witnesses later described seeing terrified teenagers sprinting across fields while teachers screamed for students to get down and hide. Inside the school, teachers and staff desperately tried to understand what was happening. At first, some believed the loud noises were fireworks or a senior prank, but confusion quickly turned into horror as reports of gunfire spread through the halls. Emergency dispatchers received frantic 911 calls from inside classrooms and offices. One caller whispered that students were trapped in the library while a gunman stalked the halls carrying a shotgun. Deputies and paramedics rushed toward the school as reports came in about bombs, snipers, and multiple shooters. Weeks earlier, Harris and Klebold had recorded disturbing videos in which they talked about violence and tested weapons in the mountains outside town. Despite appearing like ordinary teenagers preparing for graduation, both had been planning the attack for months. Harris had dreams of joining the military, while Klebold had recently visited colleges and attended prom just days before the massacre. Behind the scenes, however, both had become consumed by anger, hatred, depression, and violent fantasies. At approximately 11:29 a.m., Harris and Klebold entered the school library, where dozens of students and staff members were hiding beneath tables. What followed became one of the most horrifying moments of the massacre. Survivors recalled hearing the shooters laugh, mock students, and taunt terrified victims before opening fire. Some students begged for their lives while others remained frozen in silence. The shooters moved from table to table, firing at random and treating the attack almost like a game. Witnesses later remembered them crouching beneath tables and saying things like peekaboo before pulling the trigger. Craig Scott hid beneath a table beside his friends Matthew Kechter and Isaiah Shoels. Craig later described hearing the shooters use racial slurs toward Isaiah before shooting him. Moments later, Matt was also killed beside him. Pretending to be dead, Craig listened helplessly as his friends took their final breaths. Across the library, students were shot while trying to hide, and several more were wounded as bullets shattered windows and furniture. In total, 10 people would die inside the library before the shooters moved on. Outside, emergency responders fought to rescue wounded students while under fire themselves. Sean Graves remained trapped and bleeding near the cafeteria entrance until paramedics finally reached him. As they dragged him toward an ambulance, Harris and Klebold opened fire again, sending bullets striking against the rescue vehicles. Officers, SWAT teams, and medics filled the area surrounding the school while terrified parents gathered nearby desperate for information about their children. As the attack unfolded, investigators began learning more about the shooters. Friends and classmates later revealed that Harris had displayed violent behavior for years. He maintained websites filled with threats, hatred, and bomb-making references, including threats directed toward former friend Brooks Brown. Complaints about his violent writings had previously been reported to authorities, but critical warnings were never fully acted upon. Investigators would later discover journals and videos showing that both Harris and Klebold had carefully planned the massacre for more than a year. The attack was originally intended to be even deadlier. Before opening fire, The shooters had planted large propane bombs inside the cafeteria timed to explode during the busiest lunch period. Harris reportedly calculated that hundreds of students would be inside when the devices detonated. However, the bombs failed to explode properly, forcing the pair to continue the attack using guns and homemade explosives instead. Even during the shooting, the two repeatedly attempted to ignite the bombs, hoping to destroy the school and kill more people. Psychologists and investigators later debated what drove Harris and Klebold toward such extreme violence. Many pointed to bullying, social isolation, anger, depression, and their increasingly toxic friendship. Harris was often described as manipulative, rage-filled, and lacking empathy, while Klebold appeared deeply depressed and emotionally unstable. Experts believed their personalities fed off one another, creating a dangerous partnership that escalated over time. While some classmates said they felt bullied or alienated, investigators concluded that no single reason could fully explain the massacre. Around 12:08 p.m., after nearly an hour of terror, Harris and Klebold turned their weapons on themselves and died by suicide inside the school library. By then, 12 students and 1 teacher had been murdered, while many others suffered life-changing injuries. Families waiting outside the school faced unbearable uncertainty as buses transported survivors to nearby reunification centers. Some parents embraced their children with relief, while others slowly realized their sons or daughters would never return home. For survivors and families, the pain of that day never disappeared. Craig Scott later learned that his sister Rachel had been among the first students killed outside the school. Sean Graves spent months recovering after being paralyzed, though through determination and rehabilitation he eventually learned to walk again. Emergency dispatchers and first responders carried emotional scars from the voices and screams they heard that day. Parents of victims continued honoring the memories of their children, while struggling to understand how such a tragedy could happen. The Columbine Massacre became one of the most infamous school shootings in history. It sparked worldwide debates about bullying, mental health, violent media, gun access, school security, and warning signs among troubled teenagers. More than 2 decades later, the events at Columbine remain a symbol of unimaginable loss and a reminder of how one day of violence changed countless lives forever. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more incredible stories from America's past.